Welcome back and thanks for staying within Focus tonight. Let's take you back now to one of our leading stories in which President Cyril Ramaphosa is praising the party's delegates for the successful elective conference held in the Western Cape. He made the comments while closing the gathering, which saw Vuyiso Tyhalisisu elected as the provincial chairperson. Political analyst Sandile Swana joins us now for more on this. Dr. Swana, good to have you and thank you very much for coming on tonight.
Thank you so much, Tom.
Before we come to the developments and what has happened in the province, suppose as far as the outcomes of the top 5 is concerned, this is a province that, at least in my counting for the past 10 years or so, has not been able to go to conference. I mean, even the incoming chairperson admitting that the branches that were formed were actually literally formed at the eve of this conference. So they don't even have capacity to carry out any political program at this particular point. The IPC that was there was generally full of factions that it couldn't function properly. What has kept this province from actually holding a conference for the past decade?
Well, the roots of the crisis of the ANC in the Western Cape go back to the build-up to the Polokwane conference of the ANC, because that's when the divisions started happening. And unfortunately, the tide turned against Rasool, who was a popular leader. The ANC was not particularly strong in the Western Cape, by the way. I mean, even when they were in power, I think they were about 47%, they had to support of smaller parties and stuff like that. So, but in terms of being rooted in the communities, they've almost lost half of their membership. You'll remember that in their fighting, Skwatsha even got stabbed in the neck at some of their meetings earlier on when they were kicking out Rasool and making all sorts of changes, the James Ngulus of this world. So that idea of running the Western Cape on the basis of factions, some of those factions were in the initial stages, anti-Mbeki, others were then became anti-colored, anti-this, anti-that. And eventually they just decimated the branches of the ANC. And then Fransman came and he entered into his own period of scandals. And then from there it was completely downhill. So this interim structure that they've been holding has simply not been able, absolutely not been able to build branches of the ANC. So it's almost like the ANC is maybe starting at about 25% capacity to rebuild itself because it has not been building or operating legitimate branches in the Western Cape, because of divisions that started, certainly in my judgment, with the divisions that the ANC entered into in the Polokwane conference, and those have built up until today.
Yeah. Did those culminate into now what the president says this particular leadership needs to address, which is a national question around the politics of race, I suppose, that are beginning to emerge, and other smaller parties which are really race-based beginning to form around the colored community?
Yes, you can call them politics of race or even complete depoliticization of the colored communities, because I think in my judgment, when you're talking politics, you're talking ideology, you're talking Marxism, you're talking liberalism. Once you reduce and you say you're still talking politics and you're talking about the complexion of a person or the home language of a person, that is possibly the lowest kind of activity you can involve yourself in. And the Western Cape has a very rich history of very serious political heavyweights, intellectually speaking, Busak, Dala Omar, Alexander, and many heavy intellectuals, political people who handled political theory astutely and competently, to the advent of the likes of Gayton Mackenzie and others who are more rooted in the local communities. So it's not necessarily always the same thing. Somebody, if you are rooted in a community that happens to be colored, but what you actually are, you are just rooted in the community. That's not necessarily the same thing, but that particular phenomenon does not favor the ANC, nor the DA, by the way. The DA is also taking a hammering in this. You also have the Good Party, the PA and the Good Party are now seen as major forces in the Western Cape. Yeah, so the politics of the Western Cape have never been really truly ANC politics in the sense of 100% or largely non-racial politics. The ANC has never been really a total outright dominant force in the Western Cape. Even there were other political forces since the 50s and earlier that were there. So the ANC has never really totally dominated the Western Cape.
Yeah. Let's look at this unexpected development, and I use the word unexpected very loosely because nothing is really ever unexpected within the ANC. Some of these things could be that they were planned that way. At least they are unexpected from our point of view, looking outwards from where we are sitting. It's a race that was largely going to be between the convener of the interim committee, Lerumo Kalako, as well as Dagmo, but the interim committee chair stood down from the nomination, and this results in Vuyiso Tyhalisisu being nominated from the floor, and he goes on. I mean, it's a tightly contested race, but winning 311 votes to 282 going to Dagmo. How do you read that particular establishment? Firstly, the convener pulling out that last minute. I suppose he has not really been a popular one, as we describe the factions that are going on and how he's been running things there. And I'm assuming he saw that the prospects of him successfully getting that chairmanship were not that great. But this one from the floor, a former regional secretary of the Dula Omar region, coming out and taking it.
Yeah, I think there are a number of these big names that took a hammering at this conference. As you mentioned, even Dagmo and Lerumo and all those guys, Drachmat and so on. Obviously, we've now come to understand that in ANC politics, you are told by your own lobbies and other factions and what have you that, look, the votes have gone this way. But when you dig deeper into the internet and you see events that were happening in the Eastern Cape going back 2013 and before, you start to see this name of Tyhalisisu featuring as a disciplinarian and as a person of order of some sort. So he is a figure that a lot of us did not see as a prominent figure. But quite clearly in the structures and the branches and so on, he is well known, probably closer to the ground than most of the people that are high flyers in the Western Cape, and hence he took it. He didn't take it out of nothing. He clearly has support on the ground.
Now, is he popular enough, I suppose, supported enough for him to be able at least to capacitate the ANC to address the party's shortcomings in the province?
With the little records or articles that I've seen about him, he seems to be a person who's calling for order in the ANC. Bear in mind that we're probably not talking about an ANC that's going to rise from the ashes and do wonders. We are talking about probably just in the build-up to 24, building the ANC itself and having a dignified presence of some sort in the elections. Not that they are going to be doing any wonders. The people who are probably much better geared would be the PAs of this world. And he has a big job of bringing discipline, which is largely lacking in the ANC, which causes them to be as weak as they are. So 2024 might not be his biggest year, but maybe by 2029, yeah, he will probably have built a strong ANC by then.
Is he not being handed a poisoned chalice here, risking failure? I mean, by and large, an ANC in the province that is, according to the political report, in a dire financial situation, maybe to put it lightly. They have no money to carry out any significant political program. This is what he's going to have to deal with, and also, to an extent, deal with a divided ANC. What are his prospects of being able to certainly turn that around?
Well, you'll remember that when Paul Mashatile was the Treasurer General of the ANC as a whole now, they could not even pay salaries and so on and so forth. So whoever was taking over from Paul Mashatile was faced with the immediate prospect of being unable to pay salaries. But that noise seems to have died down, but as to how it died down, we do not know yet. So there must be some process of rebuilding the finances of the ANC from whatever sources that they are building it from. The only ANC that is available to lead now is the ANC that is in dire straits. So you cannot have any other, whether it's a poison chalice or not, it is the only one that is available.
Is that an ANC, though, that is ready to effectively play opposition politics in the Western Cape? Mbalula, for example, I think in one of his addresses this weekend says the ANC has not been able to hold the DA accountable in that province, as opposed to talking about the functions of the legislature as well. So is this the ANC that's ready to play effective opposition politics, the likes, I suppose, of what we have been seeing happening to an extent in Gauteng?
It's a big job, because you first of all need to actually have competent people who understand the laws, who understand the budgeting processes, the project implementation processes, etc., etc. So you don't become competent in that job overnight. And the guy you grab straight out of the street to become whatever representative they become, it's not going to be easy. So Tyhalisisu has a hell of a job, if I may put it that way, in his hands over the next 5 years, and probably by 2029 he might have a much more worthwhile job that he can do, because he would have built, hopefully, a team that knows what questions to ask, that knows how to read reports, how to respond to reports, how to do oversight visits, etc., etc. So they have destroyed something that was there. Rasool was running a tight ship, a relatively tight ship, and a competitive ANC in the Western Cape. And they've not been able, they've destroyed it, and they've not been able up to now to rebuild it. So Tyhalisisu has got to be humble, let's say. I'm taking something that has lost its course, I'm bringing back on course. Branches have to be rebuilt with honest, competent, well-educated people who can actually get the job done. And it's a job that he has got to do. He doesn't have any other ANC. He has got this one that is in tatters.
Let's cast our eyes a little bit further now and look at what's happening elsewhere within the politics. And I'm citing here two particular pending or imminent suspensions that are currently happening in the opposition politics. Let's start with Ngaba Banga's suspension. Has he committed the same sin, I suppose, that was committed by Musi Maimane of calling out Helen Zille?
Yes, I mean, look, I think he's going to face the music. There might be something unfortunate that could happen to him. But you must remember that the DA has got a very difficult profile on the question of white supremacy and how they treat the black people in general and Africans in particular. It's a big question. So they are sensitive from that, from the branding perspective, but they are also probably sensitive to that because a lot of South African whites don't want the question of racism and their racism as white South Africans to be discussed openly and to be confronted openly. So Banga has really stirred the honestness, and the Hornets are going to bite him. He's going to really feel it.
Something must have irritated him. I mean, what would have caused him to speak out in that sense on his particular social media platform? Of course, he still needs to respond to it, and we have been trying to reach out to him. But something must have surely irritated him within the party.
Yes, something will surely irritate him, more especially, and we don't know the facts. I certainly don't know the facts. More especially if there's always something bubbling under the surface, where you look at something, you say, is this a mistake? Is this racism? Or what is it? What is it? You know, and eventually you explode. I mean, yes, it's gone through a lot politically as well. So, and the DA has been losing very gifted non-European leaders in the past couple of years. So yes, I mean, there is something there. There is something there, but clearly the DA will never address that, but it will get rid of the black leaders and so on and so forth.
Then let's come to this ongoing battle within the Congress of the People. I mean, they got 47,000 votes. They managed 2 seats in Parliament, but they are literally pulling each other apart when it comes to the president and the deputy president. I mean, initially we saw, I think in 2022, the grouping of the three, Dennis Bloem, William Adisha and Sandile Swana, coming out and saying they've suspended the president, and there was a back and forth there, and eventually it seems like they were extending an olive branch to say, let's try and work together to try and salvage the party. Well, now the party again has come out to say, now it's the other faction saying we have suspended the deputy president and the head of elections. Is this the end of COPE?
Yeah, this it may not be the end of COPE, but certainly COPE is not as relevant as they could possibly be or as they started out to be. And I think we can't run away from the fact that from the onset, Terra Lekote became a liability to that party with no vision for growth, no dynamism, no political dynamism outside of what he could do in the ANC and in the UDF. Once he came out into COPE, he became totally irrelevant and useless. And probably both Madisha and Terra Lekote, that sort of old UDF ANC type of leadership, needs to give way. COPE has got only one chance now, the chance being that smaller parties, no matter how small, micro parties, if you want to call them that, there is always a chance that you could be a speaker here or something over there because of the nature of coalition politics. So from that point of view, that is a saving grace for them. But themselves, they are an enemy to themselves. And probably the biggest danger that they have is the keeping of both Madisha and Terra Lekote in the organization.
Yeah, we've seen this, for example, play out in the PAC where there's a continuation of 2 separate meetings that are being held by the top executive of the party. How do these play out in the end?
Look, I mean, the PAC has been confused, even in exile, by the way. The PAC has been chaotic for a very, very long time. Probably what has kept the PAC alive as to how it is playing out now, it's another thing because they are reaching out to other Pan-Africanist organizations, but they still have the problem of organizing themselves, turn it into a coherent unit. What has probably kept the PAC alive that I can think of really is the idea of Sobukwe from the start and the ideas of Kwame Nkrumah and others. But the organization itself, other than the idea, is actually in chaos. I'm not aware of anything good other than the idea that they pronounced on lately, that they are now reaching out successfully to other Pan-Africanist organizations. But they themselves are not as strong as they should be.
Yeah. Terra Lekote has come out in previous times to say, well, I'm still fit and healthy to run this organization. Is he really? And is there a hope of sorting out differences, at least between the two of them and his deputy?
Terra Lekote has got nothing to offer to South African politics, which is the main thing. There is no solution. And if you've listened to some of his comments coming out of Parliament, Terra Lekote has fired his best bullets. Probably when he formed COPE, he fired his last bullets that he had. From there onwards, he has been running on with an empty gun all over the show. He's got absolutely nothing to offer. So when he says he's still around in politics, he's an obstacle to progress in politics. He's not an asset to South African politics at all.
Dr. Swana, I appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on and your intervention here this evening. Sandile Swana there, looking at some of the politics of the weekend and what has been developments. Right.